Lady Annalise stood on the precipice of a future she hadn't chosen, betrothed to Lord Ashworth, a man whose gentle demeanour and quiet charm belied his immense wealth. Her heart, a fragile bird in a gilded cage, fluttered with a blend of resignation and a flicker of hope for a modest, predictable life. He was a gentleman, respectable, if unexciting, but the whispers that followed him, tales of a notorious duke whose darkness overshadowed his legendary power, were dismissed as mere rumour. Until the night of the season's inaugural ball, when the man who entered, commanding every eye with an aura of dangerous authority, was not the quiet Lord Ashworth she knew, but the feared Duke of Blackwood himself, her husband-to-be. If you're listening to this story, don't forget to click the like button, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments which part of the world you're listening from. I want to know how far it has travelled. Lady Evelyn Sinclair, a mere 19 summers having barely brushed her delicate shoulders, stood before the grand mullioned window of her bedchamber at Sinclair Manor. The view, a picturesque tapestry of rolling Hertfordshire hills, ancient oaks and formal gardens, should have brought solace, but today it offered only a poignant reflection of her gilded cage. Her fair skin, typically radiant with youthful vigour, now possessed a fragile translucence in the soft, diffused light filtering through the leaded panes. Her eyes, the precise hue of a serene summer sky, usually danced with quiet intelligence, but at this moment they were clouded with a profound, unspoken melancholy, betraying the turmoil within. A riot of honey-blonde curls, meticulously coiled and pinned by her vigilant maid, Miss Davies, framed a face that society universally deemed exquisitely beautiful, a perfect embodiment of English grace and refinement. Yet this celebrated beauty, this envied privilege of her aristocratic birth, felt less like a benevolent blessing and more like a meticulously woven silken net, restricting her every move, dictating her every utterance, and inexorably guiding her every breath towards a predetermined and inescapable destiny. Her days unfolded with a ritualistic predictability, each hour a testament to the stringent expectations placed upon a young lady of her station. Mornings commenced with the delicate fragrance of lavender from her bath and the rich scent of polished mahogany emanating from the family's opulent drawing rooms. Her hours were meticulously partitioned, a session at the pianoforte, her nimble fingers coaxing melancholic melodies from the ivory keys, an hour of delicate embroidery, her needle weaving intricate patterns onto fine linen, mirroring the complex design of her own life, and the occasional, rigidly chaperoned stroll through the sprawling rose gardens, where her thoughts, unlike her steps, could briefly wander. Each activity, every prescribed duty, was but another brushstroke in the carefully constructed portrait of a perfect gentlewoman, honed and polished for her inevitable presentation to the most eligible and thus most powerful bachelor of the season. But beneath this veneer of dutiful compliance, Evelyn harboured a fervent, secret life. Within the hushed sanctity of her father's sprawling, leather-bound library, amidst the scent of aged paper and forgotten wisdom, she nurtured yearnings for a life less rigorously scripted, for a love born not of dynastic convenience, but of genuine affection and intellectual kinship. She dreamt of witty banter, of passionate debates, of a partner who would see beyond the glittering facade of her dowry and her ancient lineage, someone who truly understood the beating heart beneath the silken lace. Such dreams, however, were luxuries she knew, with a crushing certainty she could ill afford. The Sinclair fortunes, though steeped in history and prestige, were not limitless, and her family's precarious position within the capricious labyrinth of the ton demanded strategic alliances, an unfortunate truth her father, the weary Earl, reminded her of with a heavy sigh whenever the subject arose. The chosen alliance, meticulously brokered by her father and guided by the shrewd advice of her formidable aunt Lady Agatha, was to be with Lord Alistair Ashworth. He was not merely an heir, but the direct successor to the immense estates, vast wealth, and formidable political influence of the Ashworth family, a name that commanded respect and a certain degree of fear in the highest echelons of society. His reputation preceded him like a shadow, long and imposing, impeccable lineage stretching back to the conqueror, lands that spanned counties, and a distant, almost glacial aristocratic coolness that the uninitiated often mistook for reserved elegance, a sign of superior breeding. Evelyn had encountered him on a mere handful of occasions during the most recent London season, each meeting carefully orchestrated and always under the unblinking, critical gaze of Lady Agatha, whose sharp eyes missed nothing. Lord Ashworth was undeniably handsome, in a severe, almost chiselled fashion, with dark, intense eyes that seemed to absorb the light rather than reflect it, and a lean, athletic frame that hinted at a latent, controlled power. He possessed a polished, almost theatrical charm when he chose to exert it, a smooth, practiced courtesy that, paradoxically, left little genuine impression, leaving her with a sense of emptiness rather than connection. During their infrequent, stilted conversations, his words often felt less like spontaneous expression and more like carefully chosen pronouncements, devoid of true warmth or personal sentiment. He recited social pleasantries with an almost robotic precision, his answers to her tentative questions perfectly bland, perfectly innocuous. His gaze, though never overtly impolite, seemed to appraise her not as a living, breathing woman with thoughts and feelings, but rather as an acquisition, a prized possession to be added to his already impressive collection of assets, lands, titles, and influence. He spoke of their impending future with a detached pragmatism that sent a shiver of profound unease through Evelyn's romantic sensibilities, chilling the nascent sparks of hope she desperately clung to. "Our union," he had once stated, over a cup of tepid tea in a crowded drawing-room, his voice a low, even murmur that carried an undercurrent of unassailable authority, "will secure the necessary standing for both our families in these challenging times. A most advantageous arrangement, I believe, for all concerned." His lips curved into a slight, almost imperceptible smile, but Evelyn, with her keen sensitivity, detected a subtle underlying arrogance, a quiet, almost inherent assumption of control that felt suffocating. He never once inquired about her interests, her secret dreams, or her burgeoning fears. He simply stated facts, immutable facts about their intertwined destinies, as if she were a mere pawn on a grand chessboard, moved by an unseen, omnipotent hand, devoid of agency or will. The approaching wedding, now a mere handful of weeks away, cast a long, oppressive shadow over the normally cheerful Sinclair manor. The very air seemed to hum with a frantic energy, as preparations consumed the entire household, from the bustling kitchens, already planning the elaborate wedding breakfast menu, to the hurried seamstresses toiling endlessly over Evelyn's elaborate bridal gown. The dress, a creation of the finest silk and delicate Valenciennes lace intricately embroidered with pearls, felt less like a garment of celebration and more like a beautiful, suffocating shroud, a symbol of her impending confinement. Her mother, Lady Eleanor, a woman whose entire existence had been a series of impeccably executed, if utterly passionless, social maneuvers, saw only triumph in the match. "Such an advantageous connection, my dear Evelyn," she would exclaim, her eyes bright with a self-satisfied gleam, entirely oblivious to her daughter's quiet distress. "Lord Ashworth is everything a young woman in your position could possibly desire. Immense wealth, an unimpeachable social position, and truly impeccable manners." Evelyn would force a fragile nod, offering a weak, brittle smile, her throat tight with a tangle of unvoiced anxieties and unspoken questions. She understood her duty with a chilling clarity. She comprehended the crushing weight of expectation that bore down upon her. Her family's precarious future, the dowries for her younger sisters, the prospects for her scholarly but unworldly brother, all rested largely on the success of this monumental union. To refuse, to even dare voice a single doubt, would be an act of unimaginable selfishness, a scandal that would not only ruin her, but drag her entire family into disgrace and financial ruin. Yet as the days inexorably dwindled, a subtle, insidious unease began to gnaw at her, a cold worm burrowing into the very core of her being. Lord Ashworth's infrequent letters, penned in a precise, almost clinical hand, spoke almost exclusively of estate management, the logistics of their joint households, and forthcoming social engagements utterly devoid of any personal sentiment, any tender word of affection. He never once expressed longing, never once mentioned anticipation, never once hinted at a shared future beyond the practicalities. He was, to all outward appearances, the epitome of a distinguished gentleman, yet Evelyn felt a profound, aching emptiness where her hopes for genuine love and connection should have blossomed. The late summer air, usually bright and effervescent with the promise of harvest, now felt heavy, pregnant with the silent threat of an impending storm. The scent of rain, damp earth, and decaying leaves was often carried on the breeze, and the ancient gnarled trees surrounding the manor seemed to sigh with a profound, almost melancholic sadness, their rustling leaves a lament. One particularly grey afternoon, while dutifully selecting ribbons for her extensive trousseau in the drawing-room, Evelyn inadvertently caught her reflection in the highly polished surface of a grand silver tea-tray. Her face, though still undeniably beautiful, seemed subtly drained of its youthful vibrancy, her summer sky eyes holding a distinct, almost haunted quality, as if they had witnessed something profoundly unsettling. She felt like a doll, exquisitely dressed, meticulously prepared, awaiting her assigned place on a shelf, and the thought was profoundly, chillingly unsettling. She yearned, with an intensity that surprised even herself, for warmth, for genuine intimacy, for a love story like those she secretly devoured within the pages of forbidden romantic novels. But her harsh reality was a meticulously crafted arrangement, cold, calculating, and devoid of true emotion. The wedding was irrevocably set for the autumn equinox, a date chosen by her parents for its ancient auspiciousness. Yet to Evelyn, it felt like the very day her true self, her deepest desires, would be finally eclipsed, swallowed whole by duty. The chill that permeated her heart was not from the gathering gloom outside, but from the dawning, terrifying realization of the life that inexorably awaited her, a life she increasingly perceived as nothing more than gilded servitude, a prison of impeccable taste. The silence of her chamber often felt louder than any clamor from the busy household below. It was in these stolen moments of quietude that Evelyn allowed herself the dangerous indulgence of reflection, away from her mother's anxious glances and Lady Agatha's scrutinizing gaze. She often wondered if other young ladies in her position felt this same profound loneliness, this sense of being adrift in a sea of prescribed happiness. Was it truly selfish to crave something more than stability and status, to dream of a glance that held affection, a touch that conveyed tenderness, a conversation that delved deeper than the weather or the latest scandal? Her governess, the kind-hearted Miss Finch, had once encouraged her intellectual curiosity, lending her books that spoke of philosophers and poets, of passionate love affairs that defied social convention. But Miss Finch had been dismissed years ago, deemed too liberal, too encouraging of independent thought for a girl destined for such an important union. Now, only the echoes of those lessons remained, faint whispers against the clamour of her impending nuptials. Her closest friend, Lady Charlotte, who had married a jovial country squire the previous year, spoke enthusiastically of domestic bliss and the joys of managing a household. Charlotte's enthusiasm, however genuine, only highlighted the stark contrast with Evelyn's own situation. There was no joy to anticipate, merely a grim acceptance of her fate. The weight of her ancestral name, Sinclair, pressed down upon her, a heavy mantle of responsibility. She understood that her family's prestige, while ancient, was in need of a powerful injection of wealth and influence, and Lord Ashworth was the veritable spring from which such resources flowed. It was a transaction pure and simple, dressed up in the finery of courtship and ceremony. Her only refuge, aside from her books, was the small hidden alcove in the library, where a stained-glass window depicted a knight rescuing a maiden from a dragon. A childish fantasy, perhaps, but it offered a fleeting image of agency and courage, something she felt utterly devoid of in her own life. She would trace the outline of the knight's sword, imagining its weight, its power. Then, with a sigh, she would return to her reality, to the rustling of her silk gown and the distant murmur of servants preparing for the grandest wedding Sinclair Manor had ever hosted. Her father, the Earl, bore a perpetually furrowed brow, his relief at the advantageous match palpable, yet shadowed by an underlying weariness that Evelyn keenly observed. He, too, was a prisoner of expectation, bound by duty to secure his family's future, even if it meant sacrificing his daughter's happiness. The final fitting for her wedding gown was scheduled for tomorrow, a stark symbol that the point of no return was now fast approaching. As the quiet evening dusk settled over the ancient manor, painting the broad sky in hues of bruised purple and muted grey, Evelyn felt a cold certainty settle deep within her troubled heart. There would be no escape, no heroic rescuer, only the meticulously planned future, unfolding with the relentless precision of a clockwork mechanism. She was Lady Evelyn Sinclair, destined to be Lady Ashworth, and then she knew with terrifying clarity her true self would utterly cease to exist. The thought was a chilling, quiet premonition, a haunting foretaste of a life meticulously ordered, yet devastatingly empty. The chill deepened, not from the crisp autumn air that now seeped through the ancient stones of the manor, but from the icy grip of her profound, burgeoning despair. The grandeur of her impending marriage felt like a magnificent trap, sparkling but ultimately deadly. The fateful wedding day loomed, a date circled in stark dread on the calendar of her soul. The evening of the engagement ball arrived with all the grandeur befitting the union of two prominent families. Ashworth House blazed with 1,000 candles, their golden light reflecting off crystal chandeliers that hung like frozen waterfalls from the vaulted ceilings. The ballroom stretched vast and magnificent, its polished marble floors gleaming beneath the feet of 300 guests drawn from the highest echelons of London society. Evelyn stood before her mirror in the dressing chamber, her lady's maid fastening the final pearl buttons along her spine. The gown was exquisite, ivory silk overlaid with delicate Brussels lace, embroidered with silver thread that caught the light with every breath. Her dark hair had been arranged in an elaborate coiffure, woven through with white roses and diamond pins that had belonged to her grandmother. She looked every inch the perfect bride, the ideal aristocratic lady prepared to fulfill her destiny. Yet her hands trembled as she smoothed the silk over her waist. Something felt wrong, though she could not name it. A cold weight had settled in her chest since morning, growing heavier with each passing hour. "You look beautiful, my lady," her maid whispered, stepping back to admire her work. Evelyn managed a smile, though it felt brittle on her lips. "Thank you, Mary." The sounds of the gathering drifted up from below, the swell of orchestral music, the murmur of conversation, the clink of champagne glasses. Her father appeared at the door, resplendent in his evening dress, his expression unreadable. "It is time, Evelyn." She took his offered arm, her heart hammering against her ribs as they descended the grand staircase. The ballroom fell silent as they entered, hundreds of eyes turning to assess her. She felt their gazes like physical touches, measuring, judging, cataloguing every detail of her appearance and demeanour. Lord Alistair Ashworth stood at the centre of the room, surrounded by his family and closest associates. He cut an impressive figure in his black evening coat, his fair hair perfectly arranged, his expression one of cool satisfaction. As Evelyn approached, he extended his hand, and she placed hers within it, feeling the coldness of his fingers even through her glove. "Lady Evelyn," he said, his voice carrying across the hushed room, "how lovely you look this evening." "Thank you, Lord Ashworth," she replied, her voice steadier than she felt. The orchestra began a waltz, and Alistair led her onto the floor for the first dance. They moved through the steps with practiced precision, but there was no warmth in his touch, no tenderness in his gaze. He held her as one might hold a valuable painting, with care for its worth, but no genuine affection. "You understand what tonight represents," he said quietly as they turned. "The formal announcement of our engagement before society. After this, there can be no turning back." "I understand," Evelyn whispered, though her throat felt tight. "Good! The Ashworth name requires a wife of impeccable breeding and deportment. You will fulfill that role admirably." The dance ended, and Alistair escorted her to the edge of the floor where her family waited. Her mother beamed with pride, her father nodded approvingly, and Beatrice, sweet, innocent Beatrice, smiled at her with what seemed like genuine happiness. The evening progressed through its carefully choreographed stages. Evelyn danced with various gentlemen, accepted congratulations from countless ladies, and smiled until her face ached. All the while, that cold weight in her chest grew heavier, and she found herself watching Alistair across the room. He stood in deep conversation with his father, the Duke of Ashworth, and several other powerful men. Their expressions were serious, calculating. Business, always business. Then Beatrice approached them, carrying a glass of champagne, and Evelyn saw something that made her blood run cold. The way Alistair looked at her sister, the way his hand lingered on Beatrice's arm as he took the glass, the way Beatrice blushed and lowered her eyes in a manner that spoke of practiced intimacy rather than sisterly affection. No, it could not be. But even as Evelyn tried to dismiss the observation, she saw Alistair lean close to whisper something in Beatrice's ear. Her sister's face flushed deeper, and she glanced toward Evelyn with an expression that mingled guilt and triumph. The room suddenly felt too hot, too crowded. Evelyn's vision swam, and she gripped the back of a nearby chair to steady herself. Then the music stopped. The Duke of Ashworth stepped onto the raised platform where the orchestra sat, raising his hand for silence. The crowd turned their attention to him, anticipation rippling through the assembly. "Distinguished guests," the Duke began, his voice resonant and commanding, "we have gathered tonight to celebrate a union between our two families. However, circumstances have recently come to light that require a change in our arrangements." Evelyn's heart stopped. She looked frantically toward her parents, but they appeared as confused as she felt. The Duke continued, "My son, Lord Alistair Ashworth, has made his choice known to me, and while we initially believed Lady Evelyn Sinclair would be the appropriate match, it has become clear that another member of the Sinclair family would be far more suitable." Whispers erupted throughout the ballroom. Evelyn felt the floor tilt beneath her feet. Alistair stepped forward, his expression perfectly composed, almost bored. "I wish to announce my engagement to Lady Beatrice Sinclair," he declared, his voice cutting through the rising murmur. "She possesses the youth, vitality, and temperament that will better serve the Ashworth legacy." Beatrice moved to stand beside him, her hand slipping into his with practiced ease. She wore a gown of pale pink that suddenly seemed deliberately chosen to complement his attire. How long had this been planned? The ballroom exploded into chaos. Gasps of shock, exclamations of disbelief, and, worst of all, the sharp, cruel laughter of those who delighted in scandal. Evelyn stood frozen, unable to move, unable to breathe, as 300 pairs of eyes turned to her with pity, amusement, and contempt. Her mother's face had gone white. Her father's expression darkened with rage, but he was powerless. The announcement had been made publicly, before all of society. To protest now would only deepen the humiliation. "Lady Evelyn," Alistair said, turning to her with cold courtesy. "I trust you understand this is not personal. Simply a matter of practical consideration. Your sister is 17, more malleable, and will provide many more years of childbearing. You, at 19, are already approaching the limits of ideal marriageability. I require an heir, and Beatrice offers better prospects." The words struck like physical blows. Around them the whispers grew louder, more vicious. Did you see her face? The elder sister cast aside for the younger. How utterly mortifying! She must have done something to displease him. Poor thing, she'll never recover from this scandal. Evelyn's vision blurred with tears she refused to shed. Not here, not before these vultures who would feast on her pain for months to come. She lifted her chin, summoning every ounce of dignity she possessed. "I wish you both every happiness," she said, her voice barely audible but steady. Then she turned and walked toward the doors, her spine straight, her head high, even as her world crumbled around her. Behind her, the ballroom erupted into frenzied conversation. She heard her mother's sob, her father's angry voice demanding explanation. But she did not stop. She could not stop. If she paused for even a moment, she would shatter completely. The cool night air struck her face as she emerged onto the terrace, and finally, blessedly alone, Lady Evelyn Sinclair allowed herself to break. 3 days after the catastrophic ball, Evelyn sat in a carriage rattling through the rain-soaked streets of London, bound for her Aunt Agatha's townhouse in Bloomsbury. She had not slept, had barely eaten, and had endured the pitying glances of servants and the strained silence of her parents, who seemed uncertain whether to comfort her or blame her for this unprecedented disgrace. The scandal had spread through London society like wildfire. By morning, every drawing-room in Mayfair buzzed with speculation. The newspapers, though too discreet to name names directly, published thinly veiled accounts of a shocking reversal of marital arrangements among the highest circles. Evelyn had become a cautionary tale, a figure of pity and mockery whispered about behind fans and over tea. Her mother had wept continuously, lamenting the destruction of their family's reputation. Her father had raged, then fallen into grim silence when he realized the Ashworths held too much financial and political power to challenge. And Beatrice had locked herself in her chambers, emerging only once to whisper a tearful apology that rang hollow in Evelyn's ears. "I never meant to hurt you," Beatrice had said, her blue eyes wide and innocent. "But Alistair and we fell in love. Surely you cannot blame us for following our hearts." Love. The word tasted like ash. Evelyn had seen no love in Alistair's calculating gaze, only cold ambition and the satisfaction of acquiring a younger, more advantageous bride. And Beatrice, sweet, naive Beatrice, had been dazzled by the prospect of becoming Lady Ashworth, blind to the transactional nature of the arrangement. The carriage stopped before an elegant Georgian townhouse, its red brick facade softened by climbing ivy. Before Evelyn could gather her belongings, the door flew open and Aunt Agatha appeared, a tall, striking woman of 55 with silver-streaked dark hair and eyes that missed nothing. "Come inside at once," Agatha commanded, her voice brooking no argument. "You look half dead, child." Within minutes, Evelyn found herself ensconced in a comfortable sitting room, a cup of strong tea pressed into her hands, and Agatha settling into the chair opposite with the air of a general preparing for battle. "Now then," Agatha said briskly, "tell me everything and spare no detail." Evelyn recounted the entire humiliating evening, her voice breaking only once when she described the moment Alistair had announced his preference for Beatrice. Agatha listened in silence, her expression growing progressively darker. "That insufferable, calculating serpent," Agatha finally said, her tone venomous. "And your parents allowed this? What could they do? The announcement was public. To protest would only deepen the scandal. So they sacrificed you to preserve their precious reputation." Agatha set down her teacup with a sharp click. Typical. Your father always was more concerned with appearances than with his daughter's welfare. Aunt Agatha, no, Evelyn, you will hear the truth, however unpleasant. Agatha leaned forward, her gaze intense. You have been treated abominably, not only by that wretched Ashworth boy, but by your own family. They groomed you for a marriage that was never secure, never valued you beyond your utility as a bargaining chip, and now they wring their hands over the consequences of their own short-sightedness. The words struck deep, but Evelyn could not deny their truth. She had been raised to be ornamental, obedient, useful, never to be herself. "What am I to do?" she whispered. "I am ruined. No respectable gentleman will have me now. I will be a burden to my family, a spinster aunt pitied and forgotten." "Nonsense!" Agatha stood, pacing before the fireplace with characteristic energy. "You are 19 years old, intelligent, well-educated, and in possession of a considerable dowry. You are not ruined. You are liberated." "Liberated?" Evelyn stared at her aunt in disbelief. "I have been publicly humiliated before all of society." "Yes, and now society's expectations no longer bind you." Agatha turned, her eyes gleaming with something that looked almost like excitement. "You are free, Evelyn, free to discover who you are beyond the role they assigned you, free to pursue interests beyond needlework and watercolors, free to meet people who value your mind rather than your marriage ability. I do not understand." "You will." Agatha resumed her seat, her expression softening slightly. "I belong to a literary and philosophical society that meets weekly here in Bloomsbury. We discuss everything from political reform to scientific advancement to the rights of women. The members include writers, scholars, reformers, and freethinkers, people who judge others by their intellect and character rather than their titles or scandals." Evelyn felt a flutter of something unfamiliar in her chest. "Interest, curiosity? You wish me to attend such a gathering? I insist upon it. Tomorrow evening, in fact. It will do you good to engage your mind with matters of substance rather than dwelling on the opinions of people whose approval is worthless." That night, Evelyn lay awake in the comfortable guest chamber, listening to the rain against the windows. For the first time since the ball, she felt something other than crushing despair. Perhaps Aunt Agatha was right. Perhaps this catastrophe had opened a door she had never known existed. The following evening, Evelyn descended the stairs wearing a simple but elegant gown of deep blue, her hair arranged in a modest style without the elaborate ornamentation she had once considered essential. She felt strangely light, unburdened by the weight of expectations that had pressed upon her for so long. The gathering took place in Agatha's spacious drawing-room, which had been arranged with chairs in a loose circle to facilitate conversation. As Evelyn entered, she was struck by the diversity of the assembled company. Men and women of various ages, some dressed fashionably, others more plainly, all engaged in animated discussion. "Ah, Evelyn!" Agatha appeared at her elbow, guiding her forward. "Allow me to introduce you. This is my niece, Lady Evelyn Sinclair, who will be staying with me for the foreseeable future." A chorus of warm greetings met this announcement. Evelyn found herself shaking hands with a female novelist who wrote under a male pseudonym, a professor of natural philosophy from Cambridge, a journalist who covered parliamentary proceedings, and a widow who ran a school for working-class children. Then Agatha led her to a tall gentleman standing near the window, engaged in conversation with an elderly scholar. He turned as they approached, and Evelyn felt her breath catch. He was perhaps 30 years old, with dark hair that fell slightly over his forehead and intelligent grey eyes that held genuine warmth. His features were strong and handsome, but it was his expression that arrested her, open, interested, kind. He wore the simple black coat of a professional man rather than the elaborate dress of the aristocracy. "Dr. Elias Reed," Agatha said. "May I present my niece, Lady Evelyn Sinclair?" "Evelyn, Dr. Reed is a physician who has recently returned from Edinburgh, where he studied the latest advances in medical science." "Lady Evelyn," Dr. Reed bowed, his smile reaching his eyes. I am delighted to make your acquaintance. Your aunt speaks very highly of you." Does she?" Evelyn managed, surprised by how steady her voice sounded. "I cannot imagine what she has found to praise, given recent circumstances. She tells me you read Latin and Greek, that you have a passion for history, and that you possess a keen, analytical mind, wasted on the frivolities of fashionable society." His tone was matter-of-fact, without condescension or pity. "Those seem worthy of praise to me." Evelyn felt heat rise to her cheeks, but not from embarrassment, from pleasure at being seen, truly seen, for qualities beyond her appearance or family connections. "I confess, my education has been largely ornamental," she said carefully, "designed to make me an agreeable companion rather than a thinking individual." "Then perhaps it is time to continue your education in earnest," Dr. Reed suggested. "We are discussing Mary Wollstonecraft's Vindication of the Rights of Woman this evening. Have you read it?" "I have not. My mother considered it dangerously radical." "It is radical," the elderly scholar interjected with a chuckle. "That is precisely why it is essential reading." The evening unfolded like nothing Evelyn had ever experienced. The conversation ranged from women's education to prison reform to the ethical implications of industrialization. People disagreed passionately but respectfully, valuing argument over agreement. And to her amazement, when Evelyn tentatively offered an opinion about the education of young women, the group listened attentively, and Dr. Reed nodded thoughtfully. "An excellent point, Lady Evelyn," he said. "The current system does indeed create a cycle of dependence that serves no one's interests save those who profit from women's ignorance." As the gathering concluded and guests began to depart, Dr. Reed approached her once more. "I hope you will return next week," he said. "Your perspective would be valuable to our discussions." "You truly believe that?" Evelyn asked, unable to keep the wonder from her voice. "You do not find me tainted by scandal?" Dr. Reed's expression grew serious. "Lady Evelyn, I am a physician who has worked in the poorest districts of Edinburgh and London. I have seen true suffering, true injustice, true tragedy. A broken engagement, however publicly humiliating, is not a moral failing. It is merely an unfortunate circumstance, and perhaps, if you will forgive my boldness, a fortunate escape from a profoundly unsuitable match." Tears pricked Evelyn's eyes, but for the first time in days, they were not tears of shame or grief. "Thank you, Dr. Reed. You are very kind." "I am truthful," he corrected gently. "There is a difference." After he left, Evelyn stood by the window, watching the lamplighters make their rounds through the darkening streets. Something had shifted within her, some fundamental understanding of her own worth and possibilities. "He is a good man," Agatha said quietly, appearing beside her. "Brilliant, compassionate, and utterly indifferent to the petty hierarchies of the ton. His father was a country vicar, his mother a school teacher. He earned his position through merit alone." "He is unexpected," Evelyn murmured. "The best things usually are." Agatha squeezed her hand. "You are beginning to bloom, my dear. I can see it already." That night, as Evelyn prepared for bed, she caught sight of herself in the mirror. She looked different somehow, her eyes brighter, her expression less guarded. The woman staring back at her was not the perfect aristocratic ornament she had been trained to be, but someone more authentic, more alive. For the first time since the ball, Lady Evelyn Sinclair smiled. 6 weeks had passed since Evelyn had taken refuge in Bloomsbury, and the transformation was remarkable. She had devoured Mary Wollstonecraft's writings, engaged in spirited debates about social reform, and discovered a passion for medical ethics that surprised even herself. More significantly, she had formed a genuine friendship with Dr. Elias Reed, whose Wednesday afternoon visits had become the highlight of her week. They would walk through the British Museum, discussing ancient civilizations and modern progress, or sit in Agatha's garden, debating the merits of various philosophical treatises. Elias, for she had begun to think of him by his given name, though she dared not use it aloud, treated her as an intellectual equal, challenging her assumptions and encouraging her curiosity. He never mentioned the scandal, never looked at her with pity, and never made her feel like damaged goods. "You have a natural aptitude for logical reasoning," he had told her during their last conversation. "Have you ever considered that you might contribute something meaningful to the world beyond the drawing room?" The question had lodged itself in her mind, taking root and growing. What might she contribute? What might she become, freed from the constraints of her former life? But London society had not forgotten her. The whispers continued, and invitations that once flooded her mother's morning room had dried to a trickle. Beatrice's wedding to Lord Alistair Ashworth was scheduled for the end of the season, and Evelyn knew that her continued absence from public life would be interpreted as cowardice or shame. "You cannot hide forever," Agatha said one morning over breakfast, setting down her newspaper with a decisive snap. "The Duchess of Pembroke is hosting her annual charity gala next week, a benefit for the Foundling Hospital. It is the perfect opportunity for you to re-enter society on your own terms." Evelyn's stomach clenched. "I am not certain I am ready." "You are more than ready. You are transformed." Agatha's eyes gleamed with determination. "You will attend as my guest, and you will show those narrow-minded gossips that you are not broken, not diminished, but elevated beyond their petty concerns. And if I encounter Lord Ashworth and Beatrice, then you will greet them with perfect courtesy and devastating indifference." Agatha smiled. "Trust me, my dear. Indifference is far more powerful than anger or pain." The evening of the gala arrived with unseasonable warmth. Evelyn stood before her mirror, hardly recognizing the woman reflected there. Her gown was a masterpiece of understated elegance, deep emerald silk that brought out the green flecks in her hazel eyes, cut in the latest fashion but without excessive ornamentation. Her dark hair was arranged simply, woven with a single strand of pearls. She looked sophisticated, confident, and entirely herself. Agatha appeared in the doorway, resplendent in burgundy velvet. "Perfect. You look like a woman of substance rather than a decorative ornament. Now there is one more thing." She held out a small card. "Dr. Reed will be attending this evening. The Duchess is a patron of his work at the charity hospital. I took the liberty of mentioning you would be there." Evelyn's heart skipped. "Aunt Agatha, you are incorrigible. I am strategic. There is a difference." The Duchess of Pembroke's residence blazed with light, its grand ballroom filled with the cream of London society. As Evelyn entered on Agatha's arm, she felt the familiar weight of scrutiny, but this time it felt different. She was not here seeking approval or fearing judgment. She was here because she chose to be, because she supported the charitable cause, because she refused to be exiled from public life by the cruelty of others. The whispers began immediately, rippling through the crowd like wind through wheat. "Is that Lady Evelyn Sinclair? I heard she had fled to the country in disgrace. She looks remarkably well, considering. The audacity, showing her face after such humiliation." Evelyn lifted her chin and smiled serenely, allowing Agatha to guide her through the crowd. They paused to speak with the Duchess, a formidable woman in her 60s who had known Agatha since childhood. "Lady Evelyn," the Duchess said warmly, taking her hand, "how delightful to see you. Your aunt tells me you have been studying social reform and medical ethics. How refreshing to meet a young woman with interests beyond fashion and gossip." "Your Grace is too kind," Evelyn replied, genuinely pleased. "I have developed a particular interest in the welfare of foundling children. The work of your hospital is truly admirable." They spoke for several minutes about the hospital's programs, and Evelyn found herself genuinely engaged, asking intelligent questions and offering thoughtful observations. She was so absorbed in the conversation that she did not notice the arrival of Lord Alistair Ashworth and Lady Beatrice until a sudden hush fell over the nearby guests. Evelyn turned slowly, her heart hammering, but her expression composed. Alistair stood 10 feet away, Beatrice clinging to his arm, both dressed in ostentatious finery that seemed calculated to display their wealth and status. Beatrice's gown was an elaborate confection of white silk and gold embroidery, her neck dripping with diamonds. She looked like a child playing dress-up in her mother's jewels. Alistair's eyes met Evelyn's, and for a moment something flickered in their cold depths. Surprise, perhaps, or reassessment. She looked different, and he knew it. "Lady Evelyn," he said, executing a precise bow, "what an unexpected pleasure. Lord Ashworth, Lady Beatrice." Evelyn's voice was cool, polite, utterly devoid of emotion. "I hope you are both well." Beatrice flushed, her eyes darting nervously between her sister and her fiancé. "Evelyn, we did not expect to see you here." "Did you not? How curious. I have always supported the Duchess's charitable endeavours." Evelyn smiled pleasantly. "I trust your wedding preparations proceed smoothly." "They do," Alistair interjected, his tone sharp. "We are to be married in 3 weeks. The ceremony will be the event of the season." "How lovely for you both." Evelyn's smile never wavered. "I wish you every happiness." The words were perfectly correct, perfectly courteous, and utterly devastating in their sincerity. She genuinely did not care. The realization must have shown on Alistair's face, because his expression darkened. "You seem remarkably recovered from your disappointment," he said, an edge of malice entering his voice. "Disappointment?" Evelyn tilted her head thoughtfully. "I confess, Lord Ashworth, that I have come to view recent events as a fortunate escape rather than a loss. I have discovered interests and friendships far more rewarding than any I might have found in a loveless marriage of convenience." Beatrice gasped softly. Several nearby guests had abandoned all pretense of not listening, their faces alight with fascination at this unexpected confrontation. Before Alistair could respond, a warm voice spoke from behind Evelyn. "Lady Evelyn, I apologize for my tardiness. The hospital had an emergency that required my attention." She turned to find Dr. Elias Reed at her elbow, looking distinguished in his evening clothes, his grey eyes warm with genuine affection. He took her hand and bowed over it with perfect propriety, but there was an intimacy in the gesture that did not escape notice. "Dr. Reed," Evelyn said, her smile becoming genuine, "please do not apologize. Your work is far more important than social engagements. Allow me to introduce Lord Alistair Ashworth and Lady Beatrice Sinclair, my sister." "Lord Ashworth, Lady Beatrice, this is Dr. Elias Reed, a brilliant physician and researcher whose work with the poor has been truly groundbreaking." Elias bowed politely, but his assessment of Alistair was swift and clearly unfavourable. "Lord Ashworth, I believe I have heard your name mentioned in connection with certain parliamentary votes regarding hospital funding. You opposed the expansion of charity medical services, if I recall correctly." Alistair's jaw tightened. "I believe in fiscal responsibility and the dangers of encouraging dependence among the lower classes." "How interesting," Elias replied, his tone mild, but his eyes sharp. "I believe in preventing unnecessary death and suffering. We shall have to agree to disagree." The tension was palpable. Beatrice looked near tears. Alistair's face had flushed with anger, and the surrounding guests watched with barely concealed delight. This was far better entertainment than they had anticipated. "Lady Evelyn," Elias said, turning to her with a warm smile, "the Duchess mentioned that you have been studying the hospital's educational programs for foundling children. Would you do me the honour of discussing your observations? I would value your perspective greatly." "I would be delighted, Dr. Reed." Evelyn placed her hand on his offered arm, feeling the solid warmth of him through the fabric of his coat. She turned back to Alistair and Beatrice with perfect courtesy. "Please excuse us. Enjoy your evening." As they walked away, Evelyn heard the explosion of whispered conversation behind them, but she did not care. For the first time since the catastrophic ball, she felt genuinely happy, genuinely valued, genuinely alive. "That was masterfully done," Elias murmured as they moved toward the refreshment tables. "You handled that encounter with remarkable grace." "I had excellent support," Evelyn replied, looking up at him with gratitude and something deeper, something that made her pulse quicken. "Thank you for your intervention." "It was no intervention, merely truth. That man is a pompous fool, and you are well rid of him." Elias paused, his expression growing serious. "Lady Evelyn, I hope you will not think me presumptuous, but I must speak plainly. These past weeks, getting to know you, have been among the happiest of my life. You are intelligent, compassionate, curious, and brave. You deserve far better than the narrow existence society prescribed for you." Evelyn's breath caught. "Dr. Reed, please, let me finish." He glanced around, then guided her toward a quieter corner of the ballroom, partially shielded by a massive arrangement of hothouse flowers. "I am not a lord or a wealthy man. I'm a physician with a modest income and a calling to serve those whom society has forgotten. I can offer you no grand estate, no glittering social position, no life of idle luxury." He paused, his grey eyes searching hers with an intensity that made her tremble. "But I can offer you a partnership of equals, a life of purpose and meaning, and a love based on genuine respect and admiration. Lady Evelyn Sinclair, would you consider allowing me to court you properly, with the intention of marriage?" The ballroom seemed to fade away. Evelyn heard nothing but the thundering of her own heart, saw nothing but the earnest hope in Elias's eyes. This was not a business arrangement or a social transaction. This was a man offering her his heart, his life, his future, and asking for hers in return. "Yes," she whispered, then more strongly, "Yes, Dr. Reed, I would be honored." The smile that broke across his face was radiant, transforming his serious features into something almost boyish with joy. "You have made me the happiest of men." Across the ballroom, Alistair Ashworth watched this exchange with growing fury, while Beatrice clutched his arm and whispered anxious questions he did not answer. The gossips watched with fascination, already composing the stories they would tell tomorrow. But Evelyn noticed none of it. She stood in a corner of the Duchess of Pembroke's ballroom, her hand resting on the arm of a modest physician, and felt more like a duchess than she ever had as Lord Ashworth's intended bride. The announcement of Dr. Elias Reed's courtship of Lady Evelyn Sinclair sent shockwaves through London society that rivaled the original scandal. Within days, every drawing-room buzzed with speculation, judgment, and, from some quarters, grudging admiration. "A physician, a common doctor," Lady Hartwell had exclaimed at her weekly tea, her voice dripping with disdain. "The girl has truly lost her senses." But others saw it differently. "She has chosen love over position," the Duchess of Pembroke declared firmly. "There is courage in that, and wisdom. Lord Ashworth is a cold fish who will make that poor younger sister miserable. Lady Evelyn has had a fortunate escape." Evelyn's parents had reacted with predictable horror. Her father had arrived at Agatha's townhouse the morning after the gala, his face purple with rage. "A physician?" he had thundered. "You refuse a Viscount and accept a man who works with his hands. Have you no sense of your position, your duty to this family?" "I have every sense of my position, father," Evelyn had replied calmly, standing in Agatha's drawing-room with her aunt's solid presence beside her. "I am a woman of 19 with a considerable dowry and the right to choose my own future. Dr. Reed is a gentleman of education, character, and purpose. He values me for my mind and heart, not my connections or childbearing potential. He values your dowry, you foolish girl." "Actually," Agatha had interjected icily, "Dr. Reed was unaware of the specific amount of Evelyn's dowry until I informed him yesterday. He proposed before knowing whether she had £50 or 50,000. Can Lord Ashworth claim the same disinterest in financial considerations?" The question had hung in the air, unanswerable. Her father had left in a fury, but not before declaring that if Evelyn proceeded with this unsuitable match, she would receive only the minimum dowry required by law, and could expect no further support from her family. "Let him bluster," Agatha had said after he departed. "Your grandmother left you an independent income in her will, and your dowry is yours by right. You will not starve, my dear, and you will be far happier than you ever would have been as Lady Ashworth." Now, 3 weeks later, Evelyn sat in Agatha's morning room reading a letter from Elias, who had travelled to Edinburgh to conclude some professional business before their marriage. His letters arrived daily, filled with observations about his work, questions about her studies, and expressions of affection that made her heart soar. "My dearest Evelyn," the current letter read, "I have secured a position at the new Royal Hospital here in Edinburgh, with the understanding that I will divide my time between research and treating patients regardless of their ability to pay. The salary is modest but sufficient, and the work is exactly what I have always hoped to do. More importantly, Edinburgh society is far less rigid than London's. Here a man is judged by his contributions rather than his pedigree, and a woman of intelligence and education is valued rather than merely tolerated. I believe you will thrive here, my love. I believe we will build a life of genuine purpose and happiness together." Evelyn pressed the letter to her heart, smiling. Edinburgh, a new city, a new life, a new identity beyond the scandal and the whispers. The prospect filled her with excitement rather than fear. A knock at the door interrupted her reverie. The maid entered, looking uncomfortable. "My lady, Lady Beatrice Ashworth is here to see you. She says it is urgent." Evelyn's smile faded. Beatrice had married Alistair 2 days ago in a ceremony Evelyn had not attended, pleading a convenient headache. She had not expected to see her sister so soon, or perhaps ever again. "Show her in," Evelyn said quietly, steeling herself. Beatrice entered wearing a travelling dress of expensive lavender silk, but her face was pale and drawn, her eyes red-rimmed from crying. She looked nothing like a radiant new bride. "Evelyn," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Please, I must speak with you. Sit down, Beatrice." Evelyn gestured to the chair opposite, her tone neutral. "Would you like tea?" "No, I cannot stay long. Alistair believes I'm shopping with his mother." Beatrice sank into the chair, twisting her hands in her lap. "Evelyn, I have made a terrible mistake." "Have you?" Evelyn kept her voice carefully controlled, though her heart ached at her sister's obvious distress. "He is not the man I thought he was." Tears spilled down Beatrice's cheeks. "During our courtship, he was attentive, charming, affectionate, but the moment we married, everything changed. He is cold, critical, controlling. He monitors every penny I spend, criticizes my conversation, my dress, my friends. He says I am too frivolous, too ignorant, too childish. Last night he told me that I was a disappointment, that he had hoped for more intelligence and sophistication, but that I would have to suffice for producing heirs." The words struck Evelyn with painful familiarity. This was the Alistair she had known, the man she had been prepared to marry out of duty. But hearing that he had turned his cruelty on her younger sister filled her with both pity and anger. "I am sorry, Beatrice," she said quietly. "Truly I am. But you made your choice. You knew he was engaged to me, yet you pursued him anyway." "I know," Beatrice sobbed. "I was foolish, vain, ambitious. I wanted to be Lady Ashworth, to have the grand house and the jewels and the position. I thought he loved me. He said he loved me, but it was all pretense, all calculation. He wanted a younger bride, and I was convenient and willing. What do you want from me, Beatrice?" "I want—" Beatrice looked up, her face desperate. "I want you to tell me how to bear it, how to survive in a loveless marriage. You were prepared to marry him. You must have known what he was. How were you going to endure it?" Evelyn was silent for a long moment, considering her answer carefully. "I was going to endure it by becoming numb," she finally said. By suppressing every genuine feeling, every authentic desire, every true thought, I was going to transform myself into the perfect ornament he required, and in doing so, I would have killed everything vital and real within myself. I would have survived, Beatrice, but I would not have lived. Then what am I to do? Beatrice's voice was anguished. I am trapped. There is no escape from marriage, no possibility of divorce without utter ruination. I'm 17 years old, and my life is already over. Your life is not over, Evelyn said firmly. But it will be difficult. You must find ways to maintain your own identity within the constraints of your position. Pursue interests that fulfill you. Form friendships with women of substance. Perhaps in time, you and Alistair will reach an understanding, a cordial distance that allows you both some measure of peace. You do not hate me, Beatrice whispered. No, Evelyn said, and realized it was true. I am angry at the choices you made, hurt by your betrayal. But I do not hate you. In truth, Beatrice, you did me a tremendous service. If you had not taken Alistair from me, I would never have discovered who I truly am, or what I truly want. I would never have met Elias. I would have lived a half-life of duty and disappointment. Instead, I am about to marry a man I love, who loves me in return, and build a life of genuine purpose. So no, sister, I do not hate you. I pity you. The words were not cruel, merely honest. Beatrice flinched, but nodded slowly, wiping her tears with a lace handkerchief. I heard about your engagement, she said quietly. To the physician. People say you have lost your mind, marrying so far beneath your station. People said I was ruined and pathetic when Alistair rejected me, Evelyn replied with a slight smile. I have learned that people will always talk, and their opinions matter far less than I once believed. Dr. Reed is a better man than Lord Ashworth could ever hope to be, and I am grateful beyond measure that I will spend my life with him rather than with your husband. Beatrice stood, her movements heavy with defeat. I should go. Alistair will be angry if I am late. She paused at the door, looking back with something like longing. I hope you will be happy, Evelyn. Truly. You deserve happiness. I hope you find some measure of peace, Beatrice, Evelyn replied gently. And if you ever need a friend, a refuge, you know where to find me. After her sister left, Evelyn stood at the window, watching the carriage disappear down the street. She felt no triumph, no satisfaction in Beatrice's misery, only a profound gratitude that she had escaped the same fate and a renewed determination to build a different kind of life. That evening, Elias returned from Edinburgh, arriving at Agatha's townhouse with his face alight with excitement. Evelyn flew down the stairs to meet him, propriety forgotten in her joy. "You are back," she exclaimed as he caught her hands in his. "I am back, and I bring news," he said, his eyes dancing. "The hospital has offered me the position of Chief of Medical Research, with a generous salary and a house on the hospital grounds. It is not grand, but it is comfortable, with a garden and a library and room enough for a family. Evelyn, we can be married as soon as you wish. I have everything prepared for our new life." "How soon?" she asked breathlessly. "A month, 2 weeks, tomorrow." He laughed, pulling her closer. "I am entirely at your disposal, my love. I have waited my whole life to find you. I do not wish to wait a moment longer than necessary." 2 weeks, Evelyn decided. "A small ceremony, just family and close friends. Nothing grand or ostentatious, simply us, making our promises before God and those we love." "Perfect," Elias murmured. And then, with Agatha discreetly turning her back in the hallway, he kissed her, a gentle, reverent kiss that promised a lifetime of love and partnership. 2 weeks later, on a bright morning in early summer, Lady Evelyn Sinclair became Mrs. Elias Reed in a simple ceremony at Agatha's parish church. She wore a gown of cream silk without excessive ornamentation, and carried a bouquet of wildflowers from Agatha's garden. Her father did not attend, but her mother came, weeping quietly throughout the service. Beatrice sent a gift, a set of medical texts for Elias, with a note that read simply, "Be happy." The Duchess of Pembroke attended, as did the members of Agatha's Literary Society and several of Elias's colleagues from the hospital. It was a small gathering, but filled with genuine warmth and celebration. As Evelyn and Elias emerged from the church into the sunlight, she looked up at her new husband and saw her entire future reflected in his loving gaze. No grand estate, no glittering title, no position in society, but something infinitely more valuable. A partnership of equals, a life of purpose and love, genuine and freely given. "Ready for our adventure, Mrs. Reed?" Elias asked, helping her into the carriage that would take them to the coaching inn, the first leg of their journey to Edinburgh. "More than ready," Evelyn replied, her smile radiant. "Let us go home." 8 months had passed since Evelyn and Elias had arrived in Edinburgh, and the transformation in her life felt nothing short of miraculous. The city itself had welcomed her with open arms, a place where intellectual curiosity was celebrated, where a woman could attend public lectures without scandal, and where one's contributions mattered far more than one's pedigree. The house provided by the Royal Hospital sat on a quiet street, lined with chestnut trees, their branches now bare in the late winter cold, but promising spring's renewal. It was modest by aristocratic standards, a 3-story stone building with large windows that flooded the rooms with northern light. But to Evelyn, it was paradise. She had furnished it herself, choosing comfort and utility over ostentation, filling the shelves with books on medicine, philosophy, and social reform rather than decorative ornaments. This particular morning, Evelyn sat at the desk in what she had claimed as her study, reviewing the accounts for the women's health clinic she had established 3 months earlier. Using a portion of her inheritance and donations from sympathetic benefactors, she had opened a small facility where poor women could receive medical care, health education, and practical support. Elias had helped her design the programs, and several female nurses she had trained now staffed the clinic daily. "Mrs. Reed." A soft knock preceded the entrance of Margaret, one of the nurses. "The morning patients have all been seen. We had 23 women today, including 5 who came for prenatal care and 3 seeking treatment for injuries." "Injuries?" Evelyn looked up sharply, recognizing the euphemism. "Domestic situations," Margaret confirmed quietly. "We provided treatment and offered them information about the women's refuge. 2 accepted." Evelyn nodded, her heart aching for those women, but grateful they had found help. "Excellent work, Margaret. Please ensure they know they can return any time they need assistance." After Margaret left, Evelyn returned to her correspondence. Among the letters was one from Aunt Agatha, filled with London gossip and warm encouragement. Another came from the Duchess of Pembroke, who had become a generous patron of the clinic and had written to introduce Evelyn to several influential Edinburgh ladies who might support the work. But it was the third letter that made Evelyn pause. A brief note from her mother, written in a shaky hand. "Dearest Evelyn, I hope this letter finds you well and happy. I think of you often and pray for your welfare. Your father remains angry, but I confess I have come to see the wisdom in your choice. Lord Ashworth has proven to be a difficult husband, and poor Beatrice seems quite miserable, though she maintains appearances admirably. I wonder if you might allow me to visit you in Edinburgh this spring. I should very much like to see your new life and meet your husband properly, your loving mother." Evelyn felt tears prick her eyes. It was not a full apology, not an admission of wrongdoing, but it was an olive branch, and from her mother that was significant. The front door opened, and she heard Elias's familiar footsteps in the hall, accompanied by his cheerful greeting to their housekeeper. Moments later, he appeared in her study doorway, his dark hair wind-blown, his cheeks reddened from the cold, his eyes bright with affection. "There is my brilliant wife," he said warmly, crossing the room to kiss her forehead. "How was the clinic this morning?" "Busy and productive," Evelyn replied, rising to embrace him properly. 23 patients, and Margaret handled everything beautifully. How was the hospital?" "Fascinating. We have made significant progress on the infection study. I believe we are close to identifying specific protocols that could reduce post-surgical mortality by as much as 30%. His enthusiasm was infectious, and Evelyn found herself smiling at his passion. But that is not the most interesting news of the day. Oh! Elias pulled a letter from his coat pocket, his expression a mixture of amusement and satisfaction. I received this from the Royal College of Physicians. They have invited me to present our research findings at their annual conference in London this June. It is a tremendous honor, and it will bring significant attention to our work. Elias, that is wonderful, Evelyn exclaimed, genuinely delighted. You have worked so hard for this recognition. We have worked hard, he corrected. Your insights into patient care and your observations about the social factors affecting health outcomes have been invaluable to the research. In fact, the college has requested that you co-present the portions related to women's health. They were quite impressed when I mentioned your clinic work. Evelyn stared at him in astonishment. They want me to present at the Royal College. They do. I know it is unconventional, but Edinburgh has always been more progressive than London in such matters, and your work speaks for itself, my love. You have helped hundreds of women, developed innovative care protocols, and gathered data that challenges conventional medical assumptions. Why should you not share that knowledge? Because I am a woman with no formal medical training, Evelyn said, though excitement was already building in her chest. You have 8 months of intensive practical experience. You have read every medical text in my library, and you have a natural aptitude for diagnosis and patient care that surpasses many formally trained physicians I know. Elias took her hands, his expression serious. Evelyn, you are brilliant. You have transformed yourself from an ornamental aristocrat into a genuine force for social good. Do not diminish your accomplishments simply because they were not achieved through traditional channels. Tears filled Evelyn's eyes, not of sadness, but of overwhelming gratitude and joy. How did I find you? She whispered. I believe I found you, Elias replied with a smile. Or rather, your aunt's literary society found us both. Thank God for progressive intellectuals and their weekly gatherings. That evening, they sat together in their cozy drawing room, Elias reading medical journals while Evelyn worked on her presentation notes. The fire crackled cheerfully, and through the window the first stars appeared in the darkening sky. It was a scene of domestic tranquility that would have seemed impossibly mundane to the girl Evelyn had been a year ago, but to the woman she had become, it was everything. I received a letter from my mother today, Evelyn said quietly. She wishes to visit us in the spring. Elias looked up, his expression thoughtful. How do you feel about that? Surprised, hopeful, cautious. Evelyn set down her pen. She has never apologized for the way I was treated, for the pressure to marry Alistair, for the lack of support when the scandal broke. But she is reaching out, and that is something. Then we shall welcome her, Elias said firmly. She should see what her daughter has accomplished, the life you have built, the good you are doing in the world. Perhaps it will open her eyes to possibilities beyond the narrow confines of aristocratic society. Perhaps, Evelyn agreed, though she harbored no illusions about fundamentally changing her mother's worldview. Some people were too deeply entrenched in their beliefs to transform. But she could offer her mother a glimpse of a different way of living, and that would have to be enough. 3 weeks later, Evelyn stood in the clinic, teaching a group of young women about basic hygiene and infant care, when Margaret appeared with an urgent expression. Mrs. Reed, there is a lady here to see you. She says she has travelled from London and that it is a matter of some delicacy. Evelyn's heart sank, fearing some crisis from her family. But when she entered the small private office, she found not her mother but Beatrice, looking pale and thin, in a travelling dress of sombre grey. Beatrice! Evelyn rushed forward, shocked by her sister's appearance. What has happened? Are you ill? Not ill, Beatrice said quietly, sinking into a chair. But I am desperate, Evelyn. I have left Alistair. The words hung in the air. shocking in their implications. A woman did not simply leave her husband. The social, legal, and financial consequences were catastrophic. "Tell me everything," Evelyn said, pulling a chair close and taking her sister's cold hands. The story that emerged was grim. Alistair's controlling behaviour had escalated into verbal cruelty and, recently, physical violence. Beatrice had endured it for months, believing she had no choice until a particularly brutal incident had left her with bruised ribs and a terror that he might actually kill her. "I took what money I could and fled," Beatrice whispered. "I have nowhere else to go. Father will force me to return to Alistair. Mother will weep, but do nothing. You are my only hope, Evelyn. Please, I know I do not deserve your help after what I did to you, but I am begging you. Please do not send me back to him." Evelyn's mind raced through the implications. Harbouring a runaway wife could bring scandal, legal complications, and social censure. Elias's career could be affected. Their work could be jeopardized. But looking at her sister's terrified face, there was only one possible answer. "You will stay with us," Evelyn said firmly. "For as long as you need, we will find a way to keep you safe. But Alistair will come looking for me. He will demand I return. The law is on his side." "Then we will fight the law," Evelyn replied, her voice hard with determination. "Elias has connections with legal reformers here in Edinburgh. We will find a way to protect you, even if it means challenging the very foundations of marriage law." Beatrice dissolved into tears of relief and gratitude, and Evelyn held her sister close, feeling the weight of this new responsibility, but also a fierce protectiveness. She had escaped the cage that had been prepared for her. Now she would help her sister escape as well. When Elias returned that evening and learned of Beatrice's presence, his response was immediate and unequivocal. "She stays. We will protect her, and we will use this situation to advocate for legal reforms that protect women from abusive marriages." That night, lying in bed beside her husband, Evelyn reflected on the extraordinary journey of the past year. She had been publicly humiliated, cast aside, and forced to rebuild her entire identity. But from that devastation had grown something beautiful and strong, a life of purpose, a marriage of genuine partnership, and the courage to fight for justice, not just for herself, but for others. "Do you ever regret it?" Elias asked quietly in the darkness. "Giving up your position, your family's approval, the life you were raised to expect?" Evelyn turned to face him, her hand finding his in the darkness. "Never. Not for a single moment. That life would have been a beautiful prison, Elias. This life, our life, is freedom. It is messy and complicated and sometimes difficult, but it is real. It is mine. It is ours." "Ours," Elias echoed, pulling her close. "Always ours." Outside, the Edinburgh wind howled through the chestnut trees, but inside their modest stone house, three women, Evelyn, Beatrice, and Margaret, who had stayed late to help settle the new arrival, sat around the kitchen table, drinking tea and planning their next steps. They spoke of legal strategies, safe houses, and the possibility of establishing a formal refuge for women fleeing dangerous marriages. Lady Evelyn Sinclair, who had once measured her worth by her marriageability and social position, was gone. In her place stood Mrs. Elias Reid, physician's wife, clinic founder, reformer, and advocate. She had been planted in soil she never chose, but she had bloomed into something far more beautiful than anyone, including herself, had ever imagined possible. And in a grand London townhouse, Lord Alistair Ashworth raged at his wife's disappearance, his carefully constructed world beginning to crumble as whispers of his cruelty spread through society. The man who had once held all the power now found it slipping through his fingers, while the woman he had discarded as insufficient had become a force he could never control or diminish. The story that had begun with public humiliation had transformed into something far more powerful, a testament to resilience, reinvention, and the revolutionary act of choosing one's own path. If you enjoyed this story of resilience, transformation, and finding true love against all odds, Please don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear which part of Evelyn's journey resonated most with you, and tell me, where in the world are you listening from? Your support means everything and helps me bring more inspiring stories to listeners everywhere. Thank you for being part of this community, and until next time, remember, sometimes the greatest blessings come disguised as devastating losses. Keep blooming wherever you're planted.